Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 FedEx St. Jude Classic Data Dive Show. Got a lot to dig into. We want to look at a lot of the prior leaderboards from when TPC Southwind hosted the WGC event, the St. Jude, as it's a pretty comparable event in terms of size of field and quality of field. But we have everything that we're generally going to be looking at, or we have looked at in the Data Dive show for this evening. I do have an addition to the shout-outs from this for this week and last night's show. A longtime supporter of the channel, P, let me know that he had a very, very successful lineup over on DraftKings, I believe, but a very solid 6 of 6. He said it was a very, very good weekend for him. So congratulations, P, on your success at the Wyndham to add to the community success, along with Gabe, who was the big winner, and myself, who came out about even, maybe a little bit ahead. I had one fantastic lineup. It would have been spectacular had Billy Horschel crossed pay dirt for us, but such is the way things are. We're going to try and see if we can't get another good sweat going for this week and weekend for the FedEx St. Jude. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my Twitter, Instagram, and Kick are now in the description. Twitter and Instagram is where I post my research weekly for the PGA Tour. I posted some earlier today regarding the winners of the past 4 St. Jude Classics, 3 WGCs, and of course last year's 125-man first playoff event for the FedEx Cup. So if you would like to see the research that I post weekly for the PGA Tour, give me a follow at your preferred social media site, Twitter or Instagram. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards weekly for the PGA Tour. That will be no different this week. That'll come out Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see the weekly wagers that I make in golf on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow over at Twitter. And Twitter is also where I do my baseball content, 3 hitters that I think, or 3 players that I think will accrue their value, 3 players that I don't in daily fantasy. It's been a little while since I've been able to devote some time to that. I'm going to get back into that probably at the end of August or early September. So if you would like to see quick hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter as well. And then finally, for my social media, I mentioned Kick, and its link is in the description. I am going to start streaming Kick on Friday evening. As far as I know, there will be a Friday night chill stream this week. Going to try to get back into that as well. We'll be very laid back, music going in the background. We might do some weekend and showdown lineups for the FedEx St. Jude. I definitely want to relax, play some computer games and whatnot. But generally, it's just a fun time to get the community together and chat about whatever you all want to while there's music going in the background, and I'm probably getting myself kicked in some games. So if you're free Friday night, think about joining. Would love to see you and hang out with you on Friday evening. And then finally, for social media, Gabe's Twitter is in the description as well. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. I mentioned he is the big winner of the community. Him and I have been working pretty closely now for a few months with some very, very, very good success. Like I said, he writes a very good article. It's going to get you well prepared for the week at hand. So go show Gabe some support. Follow him over on Twitter and subscribe to his article. It is free. If you are a subscriber to his article, you are going to be able to join us every Wednesday evening over in his Substack chat as we continue the DFS talk, get prepared to finalize our lineups after calls on Wednesday evening. So go show Gabe some support. And then finally, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Have you all placed any wagers yet for the FedEx St. Jude? How do you think the tournament moves forward? Who do you think are some of the bigger names that could be left out, from 51st to 70th? Anything else that you all want to talk about? I will have the prices up this evening for DraftKings. If you want to talk a little Ryder Cup, I'm here for that as well. But we're going to be focusing on the FedEx St. Jude. So let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2023 FedEx St. Jude Classic. And we are going to start over at Windfinder and a pretty volatile looking forecast right now. Granted, we are still 2.5 days away. I'm sure this forecast will change, such as life in the Midwest. While I am not extremely local to Memphis, I am well aware of said weather patterns that generally afflict the Midwest. Good evening, Joey. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Hopefully you had a good Wyndham Championship and are ready for the playoffs for the PGA Tour. Looking forward to our round tomorrow. But looking at the forecast, lots and lots of wind, gusty wind. It looks like it's going to be hot. 102 on Friday, 100 on Saturday, 102 on Sunday. Just very, very hot but breezy. So it looks like wind absolutely could play a factor. Oh, and before I forget, Joey, I know you went to Live Greenbrier. How was that? The pictures that you shared looked pretty amazing, being there for Bryson's 58. So feel free to share some of that with chat. But hopefully, Live Greenbrier was a lot of fun. I imagine it was pretty thrilling to watch 58 live. So yes, there's the look at the forecast, and again, we're not going to do anything too specific here, just making you aware that it does look like some rain could be in the forecast and a lot of wind as of right now. So we'll move to Fantasy National, and you see I've got the time frame set for the beginning of 2022 and the moderate and windy filter set. So for the players in the field this week at the FedEx St. Jude, our top players in moderate and windy conditions over the past 18, 19 months or so: Sungjae, Tony Finau, Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Keegan, Rory, Xander, Matt Fitzpatrick, Max Homa, and Chris Kirk. There's our top performers in the wind. The bottom portion, or the players who have not played well in the wind in the field this week, or at least relative to others in the field this week: Harris English, Vincent Norman, Lucas Glover, Sam Stevens, Ricky, Hayden Buckley, Ben On, Taylor Moore, Adam Svensson, Adam Schenk, and Stefan Jaeger. Again, Ricky, Harris English, their 2022s should be not thrown out, but certainly weighed much less, especially considering Ricky's good form this year. Harris English seems like he is back, maybe not to his old self, but certainly in better form than what he was last year. So much fun. The Greenbrier is phenomenal property. Did watch Bryson on a few holes. The guy couldn't miss. It looked like it. I don't think he even recorded a 5 on the scorecard. All twos, threes, and fours, which is a pretty good day, last I heard. I mean, if you shoot 58, I think that's pretty good. I'm not a golf aficionado or anything, but 58 seems pretty good. We're glad you had a good time. Safe travels to and from. So, with the wind forecast and such, those are your top and or your best and worst wind players. Nothing to do with Architect this week. This is a Ron Pritchard design, of course, TPC Southwind. I'm not going to look at course length. It is 7,243 yards in total, which would put it, on the shorter end of average length, but this is a par 70, so it's actually going to play pretty darn long. And I am still a little bit hesitant to look at any scoring filter, because as we saw last night in especially the WGC previous rounds, from 2019, 2020, and 2021 that generally played to average. So I think while I have this time frame, let's go ahead and jump straight to putting, and then we'll move on to some other strokes gained statistics that we might want to look at. But we know we're on Bermuda again for the second week in a row on Champion Bermuda. And these greens have always been classified as fast according to Fantasy National. So our top putters on fast Bermuda greens since the beginning of 2022 have been Brendan Todd, Denny McCarthy, Sam Burns, Andrew Putnam, Ben Griffin, Thomas Detry, Matt Kuchar, Terrell Hatton, Sung Jae, and Russell Henley. There's your top 10 in terms of fast Bermuda putting. To be specific, I'm going to narrow in the time frame now to the beginning of this calendar year. We'll take a quick look again at the course breakdown. We saw throughout the top 10s, top 5s, winners last night that strokes gained approach was the shot type. This is a ball striking course. Par 5s quite mitigated here. There's only 2 of them, just like we were at the Wyndham Championship at Sedgefield. Again, only 2 par 5s, so pretty mitigated in importance. In fact, for the top 5s, they were the lowest. 3s and 4s both outweighed the par 5s. Majority of our holes come from 450 to 500 yards, a few 400 to 450 par 4s. So we'll see if this is either of these ranges or what we want to focus on in terms of par 4s. Approach shots, will definitely be taking a long look at proximity in that page view. See if 150 to 175, 175 to 2 ends up being any particular length we want to focus on. Driving accuracy lower, distance higher. So there's a quick review or rundown of the breakdown. We went into it quite a bit last night. But what I want to do, let's go into some of these prior leaderboards, and we'll start with the strokes gained page view. Let's start with last year's FedEx Cup event, the first playoff event. It's not a great moniker because there's 125 players. There were 125 players last year. Now there's only 70, but it is the same course, the same first event of the playoffs. So not a perfect comparison, but one that I think will work. So we will highlight. Let's look at the top. Let's see, 19. Yeah, just towards the bottom of your screen there. So we'll look at the top 19 here. Only one player negative in terms of off the tee, but not a lot of big numbers in here. 4.5 being the highest, 4.7 being the highest in terms of these top 19 players. He might have led the field, actually. Yes, him and Cameron Young. So the correlation here, I mean, it's solid, decent amount of cut making, but not anything direct. Your winner a little bit further down in terms of off the tee, not a lot of big numbers. Whereas you can tell approach is just big, 7.5, 5.5, a little bit further down here, 6 and 5.5. This strokes gained approach, I mean, your winner led in the category. You got a few more elite finishes, a third, a fifth, a second. Still surrounded by your cut making and perhaps clunkers have made cuts, but definitely much more correlating, especially in these top 10 to 12 here versus the off the tee. And hopefully you can see that no first, you only have 2/5 for single digit finishes. So the approach much more outweighing the off the tee there. Around the green, I've been going back and forth with myself on this. A few players negative in around the green, but nothing extraordinarily bad. I mean, 1.2 from Neiman, but Will Zalatoris was essentially field average. Sung Jae essentially field average. Not a lot in terms of around the green, but kind of like off the tee, not a lot of big numbers here. 4.5 was the leader around the green, and you had miscuts pretty darn high. But these greens are small, so they're not going to get hit very often. So around the green, you would think would come into play. I'm still debating with myself what kind of angle I want to use when thinking about the FedEx St. Jude this week with or in terms of around the green. Putting, again, your top players are generally going to be making putts, but even your winner was pretty far down here in terms of putting. So we are looking at a true ball striking course. We're not going to ignore any fast Bermuda green. I mean, that'll be obviously in the mixed condition model come Wednesday evening, but a lot of it going to be in the approach. And I don't know if off the tee is going to be in there. I still have my suspicions that it's favoring the fairways gained portion, just like the Wyndham did. But let's take a look at when the St. Jude was a WGC. Roughly in the high 60s in terms of amount of players. In 2021, there were 65. So a no-cut event. If we look at, we'll just go to the top 16 here, just due to ties. Again, approach pretty solid. 2 players that were slightly negative. Webb Simpson was pretty poor that week. Around the green, still not much. If we sort on these, again, off the tee, with this being a no-cut event, these are clunkers. These would be the equivalent of clunkers of made cuts, right in the middle. You do have Bryson who top 10, Rory top 15, but not a whole lot of success here in terms of off the tee, whereas the approach, 5th, 2nd, 12th, 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th. For your WGCs, these premier events, it was all in the approach. Round the green, Siwoo, Kevin Na, but then you had some pretty darn good correlation right after them. So that's what's given me a little bit of pause in thinking it might be an error to ignore around the green completely. And then putting, again, your players that are rising on the leaderboard generally are going to have good putting weeks or just good putters in general, but 5th, 2nd, 5th, 4th, middling from Patrick Reed, 8th, 1st. So interesting to note or to see the compare and contrast the WGCs from the FedEx Cup playoff event. We'll take a look at 2020 again, just rather quickly. Off the tee, still not a huge facet in terms of correlating success. Approach, 2nd, 1st, 6th, 20th, 2nd. A lot in the approach. You did have some video game numbers in 2020 in terms of putting. Bryson and Fitzpatrick, 10, gaining 10 strokes on the greens. But even so, I mean, Bryson did nothing approach-wise, and that's why he was 30th. He's also not very good around the green. So hopefully we've established that the strokes gained approach is going to be what we're going to focus on primarily in terms of strokes gained. Maybe off the tee, but I still think I'm going to be splitting out a specific portion of that. I'd be interested to hear the community's take on around the green. Since these are very small greens, you can foresee around the green being a factor this week, but when you go through these prior leaderboards, they really weren't. So I can see both sides to that story. So put it in chat or put it in the comments what you think about around the green. So, well, let's just go straight to strokes gained approach. We saw just how important they were when it was a FedEx Cup event, the WGCs. And of course, this sample size will get narrowed. Let's go ahead and just narrow it now. I'm probably going to go to the past 24 rounds in the mixed condition model. But let's just take a look at the last 36, get a broader view in general as who've been hitting their irons well. So in the past 36 rounds, so long as it's been in 2023, which I believe every single one of these players has 36 rounds. Yeah, so in the past 36 rounds, our top strokes gained approach players in the field this week: Scotty Scheffler, John Rahm, Lucas Glover, he's been on quite a heater, Mark Hubbard, Alex Smalley, Colin Morikawa, Hideki, Russell Henley, Xander, and Ricky Fowler. are your top 10 strokes gained approach players in the field this week that passed 36 rounds. We looked at putting. We can go ahead and take a look at off the tee, but I am still thinking off the tee in of itself won't be in there, just a portion of it. So our top off the tee players: Scheffler, Cantlay, Victor Hovland, Rory, Ben On, Keith Mitchell, Cam Davis, Corey Connors, Terrell Hatton, and Siwoo. All right, so there's a look at some strokes gained. Obviously, the approach, we'll be looking at some fast Bermuda on Wednesday night as well. Let's move to fairways and greens. And we'll start with last year's FedEx Cup playoff event. And again, the same 19, just due to ties. Distance, not a lot here. There are a lot of players negative in terms of distance. Fairways, kind of the same, to be honest with you. And there are some pretty poor performances here. Finau, Trey Mullinax, Justin Thomas. Really bad performances in fairways, which surprises me. Instead, it's in greens and good drives gained. The greens isn't a shock to me. Again, with these greens being so small, this is generally a difficult course. Greens are going to be a very big factor. If we sort on that, oh my, yeah, 5th, 2nd, 13th, 3rd. A few middlings here, and then your winner was fairly high up in greens. Trey Mullinax, a top 5, very high in greens. If we look at good drives, okay, solid, not elite, perhaps, that the greens were, but good drives still pretty darn solid. Fairways, less so. You can see all the double-digit finishes there. And distance, I mean, you had some missed cuts. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, again, Will Zalatoris, John Rahm, Justin Thomas, it's not mandatory. Adam Schenk, not particularly long. Luke List is long and he missed the cut. Rory Long missed the cut. So we're looking at greens and perhaps good drives gained from the FedEx Cup playoff event last year. Let's take a look at when the St. Jude was a WGC. Top 16, much the same. Only one player negative in good drives gained. Only 2 negative in greens. So very darn solid there. 5th, 12th, 14th, 1st, 2nd, 4th. Greens coming in pretty solid there. Distance, again, with only 65 players. Next to last was the leader in distance. Didn't hit any fairway at all, seemingly, much like my game, except the lack of distance as well. Minwoo Lee, just some bad performances up at the top of the distance leaderboard. Not important, seemingly. Fairways, again, this is shocking to me, but you can't argue with the lack of correlation here. 54th. Of a 65-man field, 36th, 43rd. You've got some good finishes, and a couple of elite ones up here, Hideki and Harris English, but nothing correlating like the greens. 5th, a 2nd, a 1st, a 4th, surrounded by top 15s and whatnot. So it's looking more so like we're looking at perhaps good drives gained and definitely greens in regulation. Let's do 2020 just to make sure. Yeah, I mean, even the winner, negative in distance, not mandatory. Sort on the greens. A little bit worse here in terms of correlation. You got a 44th, a few top 20s, but 2nd, 1st, and 6th surrounding them. Good drives. The winner's pretty high up here. 2nd, 6th, so yeah. Pretty sure we're going to be looking at greens and good drives gained. So we'll be able to take a look at a few different filters perhaps. Let's just keep it to where we are right now. In the past 36 rounds, our top good drives gained players. A good drive gained, defined by Fantasy National, being a player has hit the fairway, or if they miss the fairway, they still hit the green in regulation. Our top good drives gained players this week, Lucas Glover, Matthew Neesmith, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Russell Henley, Grillo, Siwoo Kim, Patrick Cantlay, Hideki, and Tom Kim. Of course, most of these good drives gained players are doing it in terms of greens. Not a whole lot in terms of distance except for Scotty and Patrick Cantlay in terms of these top 10. The only player that's really poor at greens but is very high in good drives gained is Siwoo, because he's the number one fairway player, but he's not been hitting a lot of greens. Good evening, P. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Congratulations again on your success this past week. Thanks for letting me know so I could shout you out. I did so in the intro. Hopefully we are going to continue that momentum this week for the first playoff event, the FedEx St. Jude. But good to see you this evening. How was the not the Lives event, the Corn Ferry Tour event? Two people in chat tonight. One went to Live Greenbrier. You went to Corn Ferry. Got a little hometown love from 1% owned Hardy. Yeah, absolutely. Hardy played pretty darn well. I don't think I had too much of him. I just happened to be pretty fortunate. The one lineup that I used, Lucas Glover, is the same lineup that I used one Sam Ryder. It was a 6-6 with Russell Henley. So, I mean, it was a little bit fortunate in that regard. I would have really liked to have hit that Billy Horschel outright, but at least I had a good sweat going. So, I was still alive well into Sunday afternoon, as opposed to, a couple of months ago when Thursday morning they tee off and I've been eliminated. But thanks for jumping in chat. There's our top good drives gained players. If we look at greens, this is probably where the majority of my focus is going to be in this page view this week. Our top greens and regulation gained players: Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, John Rahm, Morikawa, Xander, Rory, Grillo, Cantlay, Wyndham Clark, Hideki, and Vincent Norman. Also went to the Western AM this past week at North Shore. Excellent. You were telling me about that. That is one of the, if not the biggest AM events. Send you some info on that tourney if you're not familiar. We've talked about it before. I think it was last year. You mentioned it was one of the bigger amateur events. Tigers won that. So, yeah, awesome stuff. There's a lot of good golf out in the Midwest. Even further west than where I am in the Great Lakes Midwest. And of course, the PGA Championship is returning to essentially my backyard next year at Valhalla. So pretty exciting. Pretty excited for that. All right, I'm trying to think about any filters we might want to take a look at in terms of good drives gained and greens, only because of the forecast that we saw at the beginning of the show. We can take a look at these metrics in terms of in the wind, good drives gained and greens in the wind. But really, other than that, I don't see a whole lot in terms of a filter that I'd be comfortable using. I don't like using the average length course. I know we took a look at par 70 last night, but that was just kind of a throw in there. Rough length has always been average, so if you wanted to take a look at average length rough, maybe. Hitting fairways difficult could also be something, perhaps. All right. In moderate and windy conditions, going back to the beginning of 2022, and I'm going to just put all rounds here because there's not too many more than 36 for most players, except for maybe Tagala and Svensson, who play a lot. All right. Our top good drives gained players in moderate and windy conditions going back to the beginning of last year, 1/1/2022. Corey Connors, Xander, Sungjae, Aaron Rai, Tony Finau, Emiliano Grillo, Tom Hoagie, Colin Morikawa, Matthew Neesmith, and Hayden Buckley. All 10 of those players are in the top 20 in terms of greens in regulation gained in the wind. Really, the only poor one in fairways is Finau. If you want to see top greens when it's windy, Connor, Xander, Sungjae, Rahm, Finau, Scheffler, Rogers, Grillo, Henley, Sepp Straka, and Rory. Good evening, AJ. Thanks for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. It is a packed house tonight, or it's seemingly so, for a Data Dive show. Much appreciated. Hope, homie who went to Greenbrier, got to see Bryson's nuke. Yes, he was there. I believe Joey followed him. He said for a few holes. Hopefully Joey's still in chat. He was there at the beginning of the show. Be at Live Rich Harvest Farms in September, and the BMW at Olympia. Where is Harvest Farms? Is that somewhat local to UP? And then AJ, you were at the Wyndham this past week, were you not? I can't remember if it was you or if it was Awaken. I know it was one of you two that was at the Wyndham. How was that? Hopefully you enjoyed it. You had a lot of success on top of that using Lucas Glover and whatnot. So there's a look at your top good drives gained and greens and regulation players. I was there on Sunday, went to Wyndham and saw Henley's meltdown. Henley kind of hurt a little bit. Olympia Fields isn't, Rich Harvest Farms is a far west suburb of Chicago. Gotcha. And Olympia Fields isn't far, yep. I was more so on the Billy train there, AJ, as I had an outright on him. But I've got to admit that Lucas Glover winning certainly brought me over, over the pay line, or brought me into the green for DFS this week. I had 166 lineup. It was the one lineup I had: Lucas Glover, Russell Henley, Eric Cole. It was just a standout lineup. One of them that I didn't have, Denny McCarthy, who I was high on. It just kind of worked out in my favor in that regard. But I really would have liked to have hit that Billy Ho outright, especially since I was on him all week. But I do feel good about the analysis and how he played. So we're going to hopefully continue that momentum this week. But thanks for checking in. Glad that you enjoyed the Wyndham and had safe travels to and from. I know you're fairly local to there, but thanks for checking in. Hopefully you're ready for the FedEx St. Jude. All right, let's move to scoring, and I'm going to remove the windy filter for the rest of this. We're just going to look at these metrics moving forward from the beginning of this calendar year, last 36 rounds. Again, the majority of the time that the FedEx St. Jude was a WGC, it was average scoring and difficulty, and I just don't like using that filter. Prefer easier, difficult. Other than the wind, not a lot I'm confident wise with filters. So we're just going to take a kind of a bigger look, or a broader view, if you will, for some of these metrics tonight, and hopefully we'll be able to narrow it down by Wednesday, or at least I'll be able to narrow it down, hopefully. But we move to the scoring page view, and last night we saw in Microsoft Excel that it was pretty even in terms of the players who have played the FedEx St. Jude, whether WGC or last year's playoff event. It was pretty even in terms of birdies versus bogeys. Again, highlighting the top 19 here. Only 2 players negative in terms of bogeys, but the 3 that are negative in birdies, you got a negative 0.3, which is essentially close to field average. The winner was essentially, just dead even at it. More so looking like the birdies were the favored of the 2 for the upper end of the leaderboard. If we sort 3rd, 5th, 1st, 2nd, 5th, that's pretty strong. It's going to be hard to beat that. Bogeys, you might have done it 1st, 3rd, 5th, 5th. It's very, very close. It's very, very close. Oh, man. That's pretty close. 5.8, 8.7 last year's FedEx Cup event, the playoff event. Ooh, that's tough. Taking a look at WGCs. Birdies here. Birdies, yeah, so a lot more in the birdies. Answer, oh boy, 8th, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 12th, 1st. That's strong. Not as strong in the bogeys. Still strong, but not as strong. And then 2020, birdies and bogeys. Yeah, all in the birdies actually, looking like. We got to the 15th green, awaiting Henley's approach, and had to clear off the course because of bad weather. Then went downhill after the 2-hour delay. Yeah, I mean that's it's unfortunate, but you can't control Mother Nature, I guess. But who were some of the? It sounds like you were following Henley a little bit. If you were there all Sunday, who were some of the groups that you were following earlier? Because I know Adam Scott made a huge run, even though he didn't make the playoffs. I mean, he had a huge day Sunday. It all started when I told Mark Immelman I picked Henley for my one and done. Well, it was a good selection in one and done. It just wasn't the best selection. But in one and done, if I would still had Russell Henley, I would have taken Russell Henley last week. I don't blame you one bit at all. I mean, he was my number one player last week. He was in more than 50% of the lineups that I turned in, so I don't blame you one bit for that. Problem is, I call you Trevor. That's good. That's good. That's funny. Let's see. I think it's the birdies here at TPC Southwind, but it's awfully close. We're not going to be looking at eagles. There's only 2 par 5s. They don't yield an eagle at a very high rate. Now the back 9 par 5 is a decent eagle rate, good eagle rate, 3%, but not a whole lot here. So when we go to my mixed condition model from last year, you'll see why I used one particular metric here. Now, I've been going for quite a while, so I'm going to try to speed this up so we can get through everything in Microsoft Excel as well. Let's just take a look at birdies gained. Since eagles are pretty rare here, and it looks like birdies are slightly favored over the bogeys. So our top birdies gained players the past 36 rounds: Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Terrell Hatton, Xander, Keegan, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, John Rahm, Sepp Straka, and Emiliano Grillo. I do want to take a quick look at opportunities perhaps as well. Hideki, Scotty Scheffler, Lucas Glover, John Rahm, Smalley, Morikawa, Connors, Cantlay, Keegan Bradley, and Eric Cole. I think I'm leaning birdies gained. I can see myself using opportunities gained if I'm not 100% sold on birdies gained by the time the mixed condition model comes around. All right, proximity, and then the 3s, 4s, and 5s. We'll really want to break down this proximity very quickly. So looking at last year's FedEx Cup playoff event, total prox was a fairly decent deal. A few players negative, but some pretty big numbers in here too. 365, 270, 433. If we sort, 31st from Cam Young is a middling. 13th, 3rd, 5th, 5th. Your winner's not up here all that high, but you still got a whole lot of elite finishes. So I really like this prox total. The majority of approach shots, as a quick reminder, come from 125 to 200 in various ranges, more so on the longer end of that. So if we sort on those, decent, I suppose. Zalatoris was pretty good at that range, but not much else around him. 150 to 175 is the most common or most prominent approach shot. Your winner led in that category. That's always good to see. Top 15 as well. A miscut from CT Pan, but top 15, top 5. 150 to 175, pretty strong there. 175 to 2. Other than Tom Hoagie, more so your cut makers. Let's see. Go to when it was a WGC. Very, very quickly. Total procs. Again, even though Answer is basically field average for the week, he's still positive, and look at all that. I mean, I was going to say every. Webb Simpson, you had to screw it up. All but Webb Simpson in the top 16 from 2021 were positive in total procs. And again, some pretty big numbers here. We won't have any miscuts, but 36 is going to be the equivalent of a clunker of a made cut, but second and a fifth and an eighth and a second. Strong performances in here. 150 to 175, much less so correlating. 175 to 2, a little better. Not much, but a little better. And then 2020, your winner still led. A lot of upper leaderboard success there. 52nd hurts, but 15th, 2nd, 6th, 1st. Strong. Seconds. So perhaps 2021 was a bit of an outlier because we've got some very strong performance in the 150 to 175 in 2020. Okay. For this year's field at the FedEx St. Jude, our top total procs players the past 36 rounds: Victor Hovland, John Rahm, Lucas Glover, Scotty Scheffler, Alex Smalley, Justin Rose, Hideki, Colin Morikawa, Russell Henley, and Tom Kim. If there is a range, I think it's the 150 to 175, but I am much more so leaning towards total procs now. So our top 150 to 175 players: Tom Hoagie, Aaron Rai, Emiliano Grillo, Xander, Brandon Wu, Siwoo Kim, Victor Hovland, Adam Schenk, John Rahm, and Sepp Straka. Probably want to put a star or note. Grillo, Xander, definitely Victor Hovland, definitely John Rahm, Sepp Straka. Those 5 are top 20 in the 2 most prominent lengths, 150 to 175 and 175 to 200. But I am much more so leaning in the total procs, and these are the players that are probably going to rise because of that in my rankings come Wednesday. All right, moving to the 3s, 4s, and 5s very, very quickly. We'll set that. Par 3s, last year's FedEx. They're going to be somewhat important, but I have a hard time deciphering how important. You've got a few really big numbers in here. Andrew Putnam, Lucas Glover, even Trey Mullinax played them well. Zalatoris, your champion, didn't. 5th, 3rd, 5th is strong, but then it tails off pretty darn quickly. You have 2 par 3s that measure to here on the scorecard. 1 here and 1 here. So 3.5. You got a 4 and a 2.3. Still thinking just total par 3s, but I'm not sure how much weight based on last year's especially. We look at WGCs. A little bit higher here from Abraham Answer. 3.2s, 5th, 2nd, 10th, 1st, 10th, 12th. That's fairly strong. But again, not huge numbers here. 3-3, 4-1. I'm thinking just total par 3s. But maybe, I would say no more than 10%, but could be upwards of 10%. So our top total par 3 performers in the field this week: Emiliano Grillo, John Rahm, Rory, Colin Morikawa, Max Homa, Scotty Scheffler, Brian Harman, Ricky Fowler, Xander, Lucas Glover, and Eric Cole. Par 4s, again very quickly, half of the par 4s here at TPC Southwind fall to 450 to 5, this column here. I mean, my goodness, I try to emphasize it as much as I can, but not a single player negative in par fours in the top 19 from last year's playoff event. You had to scroll. Nobody in the top 30 was negative in terms of par fours. 11.8 is pretty big. Zalatoris' 8.8 is pretty big, but then it falls off, actually, pretty darn quickly. 5.8s, 4.8s, but still very correlating. Second, first, up 31st, fifth, third, fifth, a little lower. That's strong. Let's see, we've got 1, 4, 6, and 1. So 4.5, that's fairly high. 6.3, decent correlation there. Look at this. Nothing outside the top 20 for the top 7 or so. So the more correlating length was 400, 450, but the bigger numbers are in the 450 to 5. Okay. What about when it was a WGC? Again, the same top 16. Nobody negative in terms of par fours. Nobody negative in terms of par fours 450 to 500 either. You have 5.3. Other than Finau, some very good correlation there. Other than Leishman, some pretty good correlation there too. Might be both. Our top par 4 total performers: Hatton, Scheffler, Rory, Xander, Tommy Fleetwood, Russell Henley, Wyndham Clark, Cantley, McCarthy, and Victor Hovland. Not going to sort on them, but I would star players like Hatton, Scheffler, Rory. They are top 15 in both 400, 450, and 450 to 5. Wyndham Clark. Jason Day, top 15 in both. Ricky Fowler's probably an honorable mention, 10th and 16th. So there's a look at the par 4s. Finally, par 5s. I'm not going to go through it. There's only 2 of them. One at 500 to 550, one 550 to 6. They aren't going to make a whole lot of a deal, kind of like the Wyndham in the sense, because there are only 2 of them. So our top par 5 performers: Scheffler, Fowler, Rahm, Aaron Rai, Jordan Spieth, Andrew Putnam, Patrick Cantley, Wyndham Clark, Cam Davis, Colin Morikawa, and Stefan Jaeger. All right. I'm going to move to Microsoft Excel here. It's going to be a little bit different because there's no comparing against other full field courses. Again, with only 70 players, it's kind of like the BMW from years past. I don't compare the BMW against other full field courses. Why I'm not using the WGC or combining the WGC and the FedEx Cup playoff event last year to make those comparisons. You know, going from 70 players to 125, and then 65 to 75 players to 125, now back down to 70. I'm just going to treat it kind of brand new this year, and then moving forward, I will use it to compare against other courses. But we're going to skip that portion of the data dive in terms of comparing against other courses. I don't feel comfortable doing it considering the change in tournament structure. But let's take a look at last year's mixed condition model and how it performed. Again, only 125 players, so when we go to the predictive analytics off to the right, those numbers need to be lower generally than what we are used to. But in terms of results, not bad. In my top 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 missed the cut. It's a little bit on the high end. Forgiven a little bit by having Will Zalatoris, the winner, in my top 5. Tony Finau played well. Tom Kim was only at 10%, so a decent amount of ownership. It wasn't wildly popular. Had a good event. Davis Riley was okay at 8%. JT Post in the top 20 at 8%. So it was okay, I suppose. Okay, definitely room for improvement. 25% in par 4s. That's pretty darn heavy. Definitely feel like I need to bring that percent down, but when we go to the early look file, we'll see how prevalent par 4s are are, and we saw it in the prior leaderboards as well. So I can understand why I was doing the heavy emphasis in par fours. Probably gonna have to back that off a little bit. 15% approach, absolutely. I would say no less than that. I'm thinking about adding some percent there. I used good drives gained, not greens last year. And I used fairways difficult to hit. Okay, well, I thought about using that filter tonight. 15% good drives gained. 15% par threes seems a little bit heavy, but par threes are definitely going to play a factor. Okay, there's 10% in opportunities. And then just off your screen, I'll bring over 5% in birdies. So I didn't use any birdies or better. Didn't use bogeys. I instead with opportunities like I thought I might. I only looked at birdies gained. 5% on Bermuda. Makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely going to be using fast Bermuda, as every single round's been fast, so I'm not sure why I didn't use fast Bermuda. That seems incorrect. 5% birdies gained. 5% in total procs. I think that's probably incorrect. I think that needs to be increased. And instead, I used 175 to 200, not 150 to 175. So let's see how predictive these were. Par fours, okay, 47. Approach was decent as well at 44. The best, surprisingly, was birdies gained at 42. And then opportunities was a 45. All right. Prox was pretty good at a 46. So I feel good that the scoring metrics that I would tend to lean towards are looking good. Proximity's looking good. It doesn't look like Prox 175 to 200, at least last year, was very indicative of success at all. So probably can throw that one out. Par threes weren't all that predictive. Good drives gained were pretty bad as well. And it's important to note that this is using the top 19 just due to ties. So, okay. Yeah, Prox 175 to 200 seems like an error. So that's, clearly 5% I'm getting back. Good drives gained didn't perform all that well. Granted, it was with the fairways difficult to hit filter, so that could have thrown it off a little bit. I'm surprised I didn't use any greens in regulation. That seems like a terrible mistake not to put any greens in regulation gained in here. So definitely some room for improvement, but we're also thinking about using some of the same metrics, and at least some of them were pretty darn predictive, so that's encouraging at least as well. All right, we're going to round out the show, moving to the early look file, and this is specifically when the FedEx St. Jude was a WGC. I did not want to include last year the FedEx Cup playoff event in this data set just because it was 125 players. The WGCs were much more in line with the number of players in the field and the quality of field, in my opinion. So that's why I did not include last year's Will Zalatoris win in this specific data set. We looked at a little of this last night, but let's go through some of these metrics that we think are going to play an important part this week at TPC Southwind. Let's start with approach. So the players that have had the best strokes gained approach when the FedEx St. Jude was a WGC. See, Sam Burns, only one time, but he finished runner-up. Harris English, only one time, fourth. So Scheffler has played well and hit his irons very well. Hideki, been on, only one time. Cantlay. Kuchar was okay. Tommy Fleetwood. Victor Hovland, 48th. So don't get confused by the finish here. 48th is not very good. It's considering you have about 70 in a WGC. So he finished 2 of those 3 years in the bottom half of the field. So not great. And you can see why he hadn't putt well, he didn't play well around the green. He's much improved in those areas, but he still has not played TPC Southwind well. Morikawa's okay. All right. Putting. Who has putt well at TPC Southwind? Sam Burns. You would expect, again, Bermuda Billy, Bermuda Burns, Brendan Todd, just a very good putter. That's why I also mentioned Harris English last week, because he generally putts Bermuda pretty darn well. You can see he played very well here his 1 year. Matt Fitzpatrick has putt these greens extremely well. Spieth, putt these greens very well. Rahm and Kuchar, Sungjae, much less so in terms of success. I mean, even Rahm and Kuchar, outside the top 25, isn't great in terms of average finish. Okay, let's take a look at greens. It could very well be good drives gained, but I'm still leaning towards greens. So our top greens and regulation gained players: Colin Morikawa, Hideki has played well here, Cantley has played well here multiple times, Rory, Aaron Rai, average finish inside the top 20. Fitzpatrick, Terrell Hatton has hit a few greens, but doesn't have a lot of success to show for it. Hadwin was abysmal his one time, but was decent at hitting greens. All right, I'm going to skip scoring. Let's go to 3s, 4s, and 5s, and then some proximity to round out the show. Our best par 3 the players who have played the par 3s the best at TPC Southwind. The 3 years it was a WGC. Hideki, Corey Connors. And a little bit lackluster in terms of the results, 31st, but his player performed well on the par 3s. Keegan, not a lot of success at all. Rory's been good. This guy Scheffler's been good. But you see how quickly it gets to 0 or field average. 0.5, 0.6. Par 4s. Par 4s, again, only one time, Sam Burns. There's John Rahm. He's played the par 4s extremely well. Surprisingly, he hadn't played the par 5s well. I mean, he's just field average. But he's really performed well on the par 4s. Morikawa, doing it on the short par 4s. Rory, Scheffler, Fleetwood, decent. Average finish of 28th when it was a WGC. Kuchar, Jordan Spieth. Par 5s, and then go to procs. Yeah, because we're right on time. Par 5s. Top par 5 performers. Again, Sungjae, not a lot of success to show for it. Jason Day has been pretty good here in his 2 times. Rose, not as much. Spieth, again, average of a top 20 finish in his 3 years. Fitzpatrick, top 25. Cantley, top 25. Xander, just outside the top 25. Scheffler, top 15. So those players have been playing the par 5s very well. Lastly, we will look at the best proximity players at TPC Southwind. Burns makes a lot of sense if he was the top total procs player or one of the top in his 1 year. Scheffler, Rory, Hideki. So look at these players who have played it more than once and played it at a pretty darn elite level. These guys, other than Victor, these guys have been pretty darn good at total procs. So I'm thinking that 5% from last year's mixed condition model needs to be bumped at least to 10%, maybe significantly to 15%. If I had to choose one guy, who would I pick best finish from Griot, Straka, Poston, Burns, Cam Young, or Brian Harmon? Well, without having my rankings and going through it, if you're looking at just in terms of a raw leaderboard perspective, because if you're asking like DFS, you always have to account price and ownership and all that. But if you're talking just from a raw leaderboard perspective, it's really hard for me to ignore Sam Burns because this is Bermuda. He's already played this event. I don't know how much off the tee is going to matter. One and done only. So I like Sam Burns. Brian Harman is in some fantastic form. It's hard to ignore Brian Harman. I would go with one of those two. Depending on what else, your competitors have available to you or available to them. Because you also got to look at where these players are in the standings. Do you want to save them for the BMW? Do you want to save them for the Tour Championship? Harman was my initial lean. I don't hate it at all. The form's great. Oh, and that reminds me, we can finish the show off with a little bit of the research that I did today. I posted this to Twitter, but I'll give you a little bit more insight into it. So let's take a look at the previous winners here at TPC Southwind. And you'll have to ignore all the color coding and all that for my own sake. But let's take a look at how they've performed at TPC Southwind. So Brooks Koepka, first year that TPC Southwind was used for the WGC, can't do anything off that. Justin Thomas finished 12th and then wins. Answer finished 15th and wins. Zalatoris finished 8th in the 2021 WGC, then wins in the playoff event last year. Granted, it was 125 players, but still, he won and was 8th the year before. So the year prior, other than Brooks when it was the inaugural, a lot of correlation there between success previously at TPC Southwind and then winning. Take a look at some of these majors. This is what the blue is. So this is last year's Zalatoris. 28th at the Open, 2nd, and 6th. Very strong record in the majors. Abraham Answer in 2020. The Open, clunker, but he made the cut. He did miss the cut at the U.S. Open. He was 8th at the PGA, 26th at the Masters. Nothing fantastic there, but he still finished 8th at a major, so he had another top 10. 2020, you kind of ignore. 2020 was a ridiculous year, and all the majors were played later because of ridiculous reasons. But look at Brooks in 2019. 2nd, 1st, 2nd, 4th, and then comes and wins the WGC St. Jude. So performance at a major is very, very strong correlation. Brian Harman's coming off the Open Championship, so that falls in line there too. Some other things to perhaps take a look at. Other than Will Zalatoris last year, the winners of the St. Jude had some time off. You see, Abraham Answer played the Open and then waited until the St. Jude. Justin Thomas played the Memorial in 2020, had some time off, and then plays the St. Jude. Brooks went from the Open, and then the St. Jude was just the next week. I don't hate Harman, especially considering the current form, but I don't hate Harman for a one and done. I don't. It's really hard for me to ignore Sam Burns out of those. Griot's the wild card. Like, I don't think he would be too popular in a one and done. And with this being a ball striking course, Griot would be pretty unique. It's the home run play, is what I'll say about Griot. But there's a look at a little bit of the research that went behind what I posted to social media earlier. And this is the performance of the players who played a WGC at TPC Southwind. That's going to do it for the Data Dive show tonight. Thanks to Joey and P and AJ for jumping in chat. Much appreciated. Always appreciate you all jumping in chat when you all are able to catch the show live. Glad to hear that all three of you had a good time at your respective tournaments that you went to. Joey at the Live Greenbrier, P at the Western Am, and the Corn Ferry Tour event, and then AJ at the Wyndham. Glad you all had a good time. And thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, and supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, subscribing. It's always appreciated. A quick reminder that as of now, I will be live Friday evening for a Friday night chill stream. I might do some showdown and weekend golf lineups and preparation and whatnot. But I'm just going to be looking forward to just being online and streaming and gaming a little bit. It's been pretty busy, so I'll be looking forward to relaxing. But I always appreciate the sport. Love what I do. Taking a big in-depth look at sports statistics. Trying to win a little bit of money in the process, like myself a little bit, and a lot of the community has done recently. And I'm very, very happy to hear that. If you have success, please reach out to me. Would love to be able to shout you out on shows at the beginning of the week. Whether you take a little bit from my shows during the week or a lot, if you are watching, please reach out to me to let me know if you have success. Would love to be able to shout out members of the community. Appreciate you jumping in, AJ. I'm glad I can provide you something that you can use moving forward in your research. Western Am is way cooler than the Corn Ferry. No ropes at Western Am. You just walk right behind the golfers. That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. Although I don't think anybody wants to walk behind me if I were playing in that. They might be in danger. But thanks again for jumping in chat. Thanks for all the support. For all the wagers you've made so far this week for the FedEx St. Jude Classic, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the FedEx St. Jude Classic, until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.